All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something pretty foundational. We're looking at how our thoughts
Okay.
and our intentions, like all the things in our heads,
Yeah.
really fit together or maybe sometimes don't.
Right.
We're going to be diving into structural rationality.
Hmm.
So think of it like we're becoming philosophers of our own minds.
Yes.
We're going to be using the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy
All right.
to as our guide for this deep dive.
Perfect.
And I think one of the key things for the learner to keep in mind is that we're not talking about whether your beliefs are true.
Right.
We're not talking about if your intentions are based on the best possible reasons. Like that's a whole separate,
Totally different.
yeah, totally different.
That'd be more substantive.
Yeah, substantive rationality.
Exactly.
Today we're really just focusing on, do your thoughts make sense together? Like internally.
Internal consistency.
Yeah, exactly. So regardless of whether they actually reflect, the true reality.
Yeah, you could have perfectly internally consistent thoughts
Right.
that are just wildly out of sync with the world, with reality.
Right, exactly.
And that's okay for the purposes of what we're talking about today, at least.
Guys. Yeah, so like I think for the learner, this is so important to understand because if you think about,
Yeah.
if you're giving a big presentation or if you're trying to understand some new topic or you're just like, being curious about things, understanding this idea of structural rationality can help you kind of untangle all those mental knots, so to speak.
It can really clarify
Yeah.
your thinking in a lot of ways.
So let's start with like the real basic definition. What is structural rationality?
All right. So in a very, very basic sense, structural rationality is about coherence
Okay.
of your mental states, and mental states we're thinking.
Mm.
Beliefs, intentions, hopes, fears, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
And it's about whether those different pieces of your mental life are working together, or if they're clashing, if they're pulling you in opposite directions.
Oh, okay. So do you have any like thought experiments or like examples
Sure,
that
right.
might help illustrate this?
Yeah, so let's imagine someone who has the following three beliefs.
Okay.
I am an excellent cook.
Okay.
Excellent cooks never overcook eggs,
Right.
and I just overcook these eggs.
Okay.
So you can see, like on the face of it, these three statements
Yeah.
create a kind of tension.
Right.
They can't all be true at the same time.
Right.
So there's a kind of incoherence there in that set of beliefs.
Okay. So it's like a little logical puzzle, right? And
Yeah.
it's right in someone's head.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So that's one very simple example.
Now, what about like intentions? So like if we move away from beliefs to intentions.
Right. So one common way that intentions can be structurally irrational
Okay.
is what philosophers call instrumental irrationality.
Okay.
So let's imagine you have someone who intends to, write a book.
Okay.
And they believe that in order to write this book, they have to, organize all their notes.
Mm-hmm.
But then they have no intention of actually organizing their notes.
Yes. Okay.
So again, there's a kind of mismatch between what they believe is necessary for their goal and what they're actually intending to do.
Gotcha.
So that would be another example of structural irrationality.
Okay, so it's like the logic between the things you're trying to do and
Yeah.
how to get there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this concept, this idea, this feels very like basic, foundational.
Yeah.
Has this been something that philosophers have been thinking about
Yeah, it's a good question.
forever?
It's interesting. The term structural rationality is actually relatively recent.
Really?
Our source here cites Scanlon, writing in 2007, as a kind of a key figure in popularizing this term.
Gotcha.
But if you look at the history of the ideas, you find that a lot of the
Yeah.
underlying ideas were already present in work from the 70s and 80s, particularly in discussions around, practical reason.
Okay.
Philosophers like Hill, Greenspan, Dancy, Darwall.
Yeah, I know Darwall a little bit.
Yeah. So Darwall's work is particularly interesting here.
What was kind of the core of his argument?
So Darwall was writing in 1983, I believe, a book called Impartial Reason.
Okay.
And the argument he gives there is basically pushing back against the idea
Okay.
that all reasons for action
Okay.
ultimately boil down to your desires.
Right.
So the kind of picture that
Yep.
was common at the time was you have some desire or goal, and if you believe some action is necessary to
Okay.
achieving that goal,
Yep.
then you have a reason to perform that action.
Okay, yeah.
And if you don't perform the action, then that's irrational because you're not responding to the reasons that you have.
I mean, that sounds very, very reasonable to me.
Right. It's a very intuitive picture.
Okay.
But Darwall's argument, he's pushing back against this.
Okay.
And he says, no, it's not necessarily about responding to reasons.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a different kind of failure.
Okay.
A failure of relative rationality, he calls it,
Okay.
which is very close to the idea of structural rationality as we understand it now.
Gotcha. So he's saying it's like a failure of the logic in your own head rather than a failure to actually
Yeah,
pursue what you want.
that's exactly right.
Okay.
And he gives a really nice example to illustrate this.
Okay.
He says, imagine someone, Joe, who intends to kill Jay.
Okay.
All right. And Joe believes that the best way to kill Jay is to use a cleaver.
Mm.
But Joe has no intention of picking up the cleaver.
Okay. So it's like a
Failure
Sure.
to follow through.
exactly.
Darwall's point is that the irrationality here doesn't come from the fact that Joe has a reason to use the cleaver.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who knows whether she does have a reason to use the cleaver, right? Maybe not.
Yeah.
The point is, the irrationality here is just that her intentions and her beliefs
Yeah.
about what's necessary are misaligned.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
So that's what makes it irrational.
So that's a really important distinction to make because
Yeah.
I feel like often, if someone says, "Well, I have a goal, therefore anything I do to achieve it is rational."
Right, exactly.
But you're really pointing to something more
Yeah.
subtle there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this idea is also helpful because it helps us avoid a certain kind of problem that can arise
Mm-hmm.
if you don't distinguish structural rationality.
Okay.
So there's this worry about bootstrap,
Bootstrapping. Okay.
where the thought is if you don't have this distinction, then maybe just having some crazy attitude
Mm-hmm.
gives you a reason to have all these other crazy attitudes, as long as they all kind of fit together.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So imagine someone who believes that he is Superman.
Okay.
And this person also believes that Superman can fly,
Yeah.
but he believes that he cannot fly.
Okay.
Now, we would ordinarily say this is irrational.
That sounds pretty irrational.
But if rationality is just about everything fitting together,
Right.
then you might worry that somehow his belief that he's Superman and his belief that Superman can fly somehow gives him a reason to believe that he can fly,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
which seems crazy.
Yeah.
But if you have this distinction, then you can say, well, no, it's not that he gains a reason to
Mm.
believe he can fly. It's just that those three beliefs together are incoherent.
Gotcha. So it's the incoherence that's the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's one reason why this distinction is useful.
So we've kind of danced around it, but can we talk about like the key characteristics of structural rationality? Like what are the things
Yeah.
philosophers have kind of identified?
Yeah, so one thing we've already been talking about is that it deals with combinations of attitudes.
Right.
It's not about any one attitude taken in isolation.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, whether or not it's irrational to believe that you're a good cook
Right.
just depends on, whether you are or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or whether or not it's irrational to overcook eggs.
Right.
Maybe it depends on what you're trying to do.
Right.
But the combination of those two things, plus the belief that good cooks don't overcook eggs,
Yeah.
that's what creates the structural irrationality.
Right. So it's the interplay between
exactly.
it. Yeah.
Another important feature is that structural rationality can be evaluated completely independently of whether or not any of the individual attitudes are actually substantively rational. So, yeah, we can ask the question whether it's rational to believe that, all forms of taxation are illegitimate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to depend on, your view about politics
Right.
and morality.
Right.
But we can also ask the question, suppose someone believes that all forms of taxation are illegitimate, and they also believe that, income tax is a perfectly legitimate form of government revenue.
Right.
We can say that that combination of beliefs is structurally irrational,
Yeah.
regardless of
Regardless of how we feel about taxes in general.
Right.
Yeah.
So we don't need to settle the question of whether either one of those individual beliefs is substantively rational in order to evaluate the structural rationality
Gotcha. Okay.
of the combination.
And then third, our source mentions that we don't need to know the person's situation to know if their beliefs are structurally irrational.
Yeah, that's right.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
So if someone, let's go back to our shopper case, if someone intends to go to the store
Okay.
and they believe that biking is the only way to get there,
Hmm.
and yet they have no intention to bike, we can just, from that information alone, say that that combination of attitudes is structurally irrational.
Right. So we don't need to know, like,
We don't need to know.
oh, maybe their bike is broken or maybe they have a car.
Exactly.
We can just kind of look at that and be like,
Yeah, all we need to know
yeah, no, that doesn't make sense.
is that they have those three mental states.
Yeah.
And we can say that's structurally irrational.
Yeah, okay.
Whereas we were asking a question about substantive rationality, like,
Mhm.
is it substantively rational for them to intend to go to the store?
Right.
Well, then we would need to know a lot more about their situation.
Yeah, like what they're going to buy, how much money they have. Yeah.
Yeah.
All sorts of things.
But for structural rationality, we don't need all that information.
Okay, gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. And one final question about the characteristics. What does it mean that structural rationality is formal?
Right. So that means that the standard of structural rationality
Okay.
applies regardless of the content of your attitudes.
Okay.
So, for instance, the principle that it's irrational to believe P and not P,
Right.
that principle holds regardless of what P is.
Right.
It doesn't matter if P is some, complicated statement about quantum mechanics,
Okay.
or if it's just a very simple statement about the weather.
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
So it's the structure. It's the form that
it's just all
matters.
structure, yeah.
The content.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
So that's another key feature of structural rationality.
So we've talked about this distinction between structural rationality and
Yeah.
substantive rationality.
Mm-hmm.
And our source mentions that, while that's a very important distinction to make, it's also kind of a point of contention for
That's right.
philosophy.
Yeah, there's actually quite a lot of debate
Yeah.
about the relationship between structural rationality and substantive rationality.
So what are some of the views on how they relate?
Well, one view is that rationality, simpliciter, just rationality,
Okay.
is just structural rationality.
Okay.
So on this view, there's no such thing as substantive rationality, or at least substantive rationality is not a genuine form of rationality.
So on this view, you're basically saying that to be rational is just to have your beliefs and intentions, all that stuff, internally coherent.
That's right.
Okay.
And whether or not your beliefs are actually true,
Yeah.
that's just a separate issue.
Okay.
It doesn't bear on whether you're rational or not.
Okay. So who are like some of the philosophers that have
Yeah.
supported this view?
So some of the people who have defended this view are people like Scanlon, John Broome, and Michael Ridge.
Okay.
So these are all people who've written a lot
Yes.
about structural rationality.
And what are some of the arguments that they give?
Well, one common argument is based on this idea that rationality supervenes on the mind.
Oh, okay. Now, what does that mean? Supervenes on the mind.
So what that means is that there can't be a change in whether someone's rational without there being a corresponding change in their mental states.
Okay.
So the thought is, well, our reasons for believing things or for doing things, those reasons don't necessarily supervene on our minds.
Oh, okay.
So Broome has this famous example about salmonella.
Okay.
So suppose Lois is presented with a piece of fish and it's contaminated with salmonella.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, there's a reason for Lois not to eat the fish, right?
Right.
But suppose that Lois is completely unaware of the salmonella.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's not part of her mental state.
Okay.
Now, the thought is, if rationality supervenes on the mind, then Lois can't be irrational for failing to respond to this reason,
Right.
because the reason is not part of her mental state.
Yeah, because it's like outside her knowledge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's one argument that's given in support of this view.
Okay, but couldn't you also argue that, part of rationality is knowing about the salmonella?
Right. That's what defenders of substantive rationality would say.
Yeah.
They would say, no, look, there is a sense in which Lois is irrational
Mm-hmm.
because she's not responding to the reasons that are available to her.
Okay.
Now, you might think, well, those reasons aren't available to her because she's just ignorant.
Right.
But the defender of substantive rationality will say, no. We're not talking about reasons that you have to, go out and discover.
Mm-hmm.
We're just talking about reasons that are, in some sense, present in your evidence.
Okay.
So the idea is that if you have evidence that the fish is contaminated with salmonella, then there's a reason for you not to eat it,
Okay.
even if you don't realize that that evidence is there.
Okay.
So they would say the lowest is being substantively irrational.
So then what are some of the other views on the relationship between these two ideas?
Well, another view is that structural and substantive rationality actually just come to the same thing.
Okay.
So on this view, there's really only one kind of rationality,
Mm-hmm.
and structural rationality
Yeah.
and substantive rationality are just two different ways of
Right.
describing it.
Gotcha.
So defenders of this view will often say something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Look, substantive rationality is about responding to the reasons that you have,
Mm-hmm.
but the reasons that you have, those are just the reasons that your evidence makes available to you.
Right.
And your evidence, well, that supervenes on your mental states.
Okay.
So ultimately, the requirement to respond to your reasons is just a requirement to have a certain kind of coherence
Mm-hmm.
among your mental states.
Okay.
So structural rationality and substantive rationality, they just boil down to the same thing.
Okay. That makes sense, but it also seems like there's a pretty big difference between just responding to your evidence
Yeah.
and like really understanding like the deeper reasons.
Right. And that's what defenders of the distinction
Yeah.
will say.
Yeah.
They'll say, no, look, there are cases where someone might be substantively irrational, but not structurally irrational.
Okay.
So, if I believe that the Orioles are going to win the World Series,
Okay.
and I have no evidence for this,
Yeah.
maybe I just like the Orioles.
Right.
Well, I'm being substantively irrational,
Right. Right.
but I'm not necessarily structurally irrational
Okay.
because, I guess I could have the belief that the Orioles are going to win the World Series, and that
Mhm.
could be coherent with all my other beliefs.
Right. Yeah. It's not.
I mean, it's a bad belief,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not like it contradicts any of my other beliefs.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not like you also believe that they're gonna lose or something.
Exactly. So that would be a case where you have substantive irrationality
Mm-hmm.
without structural
Yeah.
irrationality.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's one argument for why these two things should be kept distinct.
So are there any views that try to understand these two in terms of each other?
Yeah, so there's a view called the reductionist view.
Okay.
And on this view, structural rationality can ultimately be explained in terms of substantive rationality.
Okay. Now, how does that work?
So the idea here
Yeah.
is that to be structurally irrational is just to have some combination of attitudes that guarantees that you're going to be substantively irrational,
Okay.
no matter what the world is like.
Okay.
So for example, if I believe that P,
Mm-hmm.
and I also believe that not P,
Yeah.
well, those two beliefs can't both be true.
Right.
So no matter what the world is like, at least one of those beliefs is going to be false,
Yeah.
which means at least one of those beliefs is going to be substantively irrational.
Okay.
So the idea is that the structural irrationality of believing P and not P, that can be explained in terms of this guarantee of substantive irrationality.
Gotcha. So it's like the structural irrationality is like a red flag that says,
Exactly.
hey, no matter what, you're going to run into some substantive irrationality down the road.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like you're setting yourself up for failure
Yeah.
if you have this incoherent set of attitudes.
But is it possible to have, a set of beliefs or intentions or whatever that
Yeah.
are all fine individually, but together
Yeah.
are irrational?
Yeah, so that's actually one of the main challenges to this reductionist view.
Okay.
So critics of this view, people like Broomhagen and Jonathan Way, have pointed out that there seem to be cases where you can have a set of attitudes that are all individually okay,
Mm-hmm.
but that are jointly irrational.
Okay.
So, for example, let's go back to our shopper case.
Okay.
Suppose that your evidence suggests that the only way to get to the store is to bike.
Mm-hmm.
And suppose that your reasons permit you to go to the store, but they don't strictly require it.
Okay.
So, it'd be nice to go to the store,
Yeah.
but it's not like you have to go to the store.
Right. Right.
Well, then it seems like your reasons also permit you to bike to the store,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't strictly require it. So in that case, neither the intention to go to the store, nor the belief that you have to bike to get there, nor the lack of intention to bike, neither one of those is individually substantively irrational.
Right.
But the combination of those three attitudes
Yeah.
is clearly structurally irrational.
It just doesn't fit together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's a challenge to this view.
So it seems like it's really tough to pin down this relationship
Yeah, it's a very tricky issue.
between structural and substantive rationality.
There's actually another kind of reduction that's sometimes proposed,
Okay.
which goes in the opposite direction.
Okay.
So instead of trying to reduce structural rationality to substantive rationality, this view tries to reduce substantive rationality to structural rationality.
So you're saying like the reasons themselves are just what comes out of like a perfectly coherent
That's right.
mind.
That's the idea.
So if you had all of your beliefs and intentions all figured out perfectly, whatever comes out of that, those are your reasons.
That's right.
Okay.
So the thought is that having a reason to believe something, for instance, just is to be such that you would believe it if you were fully rational.
Okay.
So reasons are defined in terms of this idealized state of rationality.
But isn't that kind of circular? I mean, how do you know
Right.
what a perfectly rational mind would believe?
Yeah, so that's one challenge to this view.
Okay.
It's not clear how to specify what this idealized state of rationality looks like.
Right.
And then another challenge is that there might be multiple ways to resolve incoherence.
Right. Right.
So, if I have a set of incoherent beliefs,
Yeah.
there might be many different ways that I could revise my beliefs
Yeah.
in order to make them coherent.
Yeah, so even if you did have like a perfectly rational mind, maybe there's lots of different equally rational things to it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, interesting.
So those are some of the challenges to this reductionist view.
So it seems like maybe this distinction between structural and substantive rationality is like a genuine distinction.
Yeah.
Like they're really different.
Yeah, so that's another view.
Okay.
Some people think that structural rationality
Right.
and substantive rationality are just two different things. They're both genuine forms of rationality,
Okay.
but they're distinct.
Okay.
They can come apart.
Okay.
So on this view, it's possible to be structurally rational, but substantively irrational,
Okay.
and vice versa.
So then what happens if they conflict?
Right. So that's a good question.
Yeah.
So if you have these two different kinds of rationality and they can conflict, then which one wins?
Yeah.
That's a question that philosophers are still debating.
Okay.
But one suggestion is that structural rationality can be understood in a way that helps to minimize these conflicts. So the thought is that structural rationality is really about prohibitions on combinations of attitudes. So it's not that structural rationality tells you exactly what to believe.
Right.
It's more like it rules out certain combinations of beliefs.
Okay.
So, for example, structural rationality might rule out believing P and not P.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily tell you whether you should believe P or not P.
Right.
It just says you can't believe both.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So on this view, structural rationality is kind of a constraint. It's not a guide.
Okay.
It's not telling you exactly what to do.
It's more like it's saying, hey, these things don't go together.
Exactly.
You got to figure out which one's wrong.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So that's one way to think about structural rationality that helps to minimize
Okay.
the potential for conflict with substantive rationality.
Because it still leaves room for the reasons
Exactly.
to matter.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
So yeah, that's kind of the lay of the land when it comes to the relationship between
Yeah, it's
structural and substantive rationality.
interesting, but also complicated.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue,
Yeah.
but it's also a very important one
Yeah.
because it really gets at the heart of what it means to be rational.
Okay, so let's move on now to like concrete examples.